you want to support sometimes, so you can do that in code and elsewhere. So those kinds of lower level details. .strings. We won't use this just for now, but this allows you to have translations of your program, so that if you want to have Spanish support, French support, Chinese support, and the like, it allows you, and a lot of languages support this, it allows you to write a string like quote unquote hello in your code, but before that string is displayed on the screen, a lookup happens in this file, and if the user setting is for Chinese or for Spanish or the like, rather than quote unquote hello being returned, the value of hello for that particular language is returned. So localization is relatively easy, and frankly, for those of you interested in startups and the like, and you want to commercialize your application, this is the sort of thing, do it now. Write your code in a way that you've localized your strings. It's super simple. You call a single method that calls a macro, really, that has a comma-separated list of a name and a comment, and it allows you to have this layer of indirection. Slight inefficiency, arguably, but worth it rather than having to change hundreds of lines of code or thousands in 6 months.
In the previous file you showed,
mm-hmm.
can you add settings to that?
Yes, you can, simply by right-clicking and choosing Add Row.
So
yes.
That would be like if you want like a universal kind of setting for your application.
Correct. Although if you want some universal settings for your app, you would probably not use the default one, which is really SDK specific, and just create your own preferences.plist file and then isolate it to your own application. Demo prefix.pch. This is a precompiled header. This is, again, a file that pretty much gets automatically appended to the top of all of your files just to make sure you have access to certain things. Rarely, if ever, will you have to touch that file. Don't delete it, but it's there. So I mention all of these really so that you can cross off your mental list things that you need to care about just now. Lastly, main.m. Surprisingly, this too, you don't really need to care about. It exists. It imports UIKit, because we're making a GUI app now. App delegate, we'll see what that means in a moment. Here's the main method, and it apparently returns UI application main ... That's it. Rarely, if ever, should you have to touch the main method. It exists to bootstrap the whole process, because Objective-C is built on C, so you need a main function. But all of the magic is going to happen in other files. So generally, never touch this file, but know that it exists. All right, any questions on all the stuff you can ignore for now? All right, good. So let's hide this, hide this, hide this. Look how simple iPhone programming is getting. All right, so what actually now is happening? So when you click Run, let's see what this thing does. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command-R, and the progress bar is going to compile. It's going to launch the simulator. Depending on the speed of your computer, this might happen slower or faster. That's a single view application. Out of the box, no code changes, nothing. That's what you get. Now, I can click all day long. It's not going to do anything, but there's the rectangle that I promised, a generic gray box filling the whole UI window. So we can start populating this with some stuff, but let's just do a simple demo. So here's my viewcontroller.nib, even though it's XIB, people say nib. I don't know what a view controller is yet. We'll tease that apart. I'm ignoring app delegate for the moment, but let's just actually add something to our palette here. So it's hard to see on the projector, but this background here is like graph paper, so it helps you size things and lay things out. If I want to add some widgets to this thing, let me expose the right-hand view. And as I mentioned a week or so ago, this is where Apple hid all of the otherwise complex stuff. At the bottom here, notice that we have a whole list of objects, and there's some fun stuff here, right? There's a label, there's a button, there's one of these toggles, text fields, sliders, switches, progress views, page control, all of the little fancy widgets you have seen on iPhones or equivalently Android and the like. You can drag and drop them. From here, realize that there's menus here for objects and other different things, so if you get confused, just kind of click around until you see what you're looking for. For instance, this is just a list of classes. If you want to instantiate one of these classes in a certain way, this is frankly, this is useless. This is like if you forget the syntax of the language, you can drag and drop this and remind yourself. This is where you can play movies, or drag and drop movies at least. So I'm going to click on the little one that looks like a generic object, this cube, and let me go to the label. And I'm just going to drag and drop the label. Now, this is not iPhone programming per se, but it's one way of just expediting the process. All of this could be done in code, and that's what we'll do eventually anyway. So here's this label. I'm just going to say hello. If I want to change the aesthetics, I can click it. Then up here, there's all these things called inspectors. I always forget what the icons means, but if you hover over it, this is the file inspector at left. This is the quick help inspector, identity inspector, attributes. size, and connections. This one's actually super useful, this quick help. When you're in code mode, if you click on almost any variable or function these days, you'll see a little cheat sheet on the right-hand side that reminds you what it is, what its usage is, what its parameters are. So there actually is some really compelling features of the IDE. I'm going to care about the attributes for now. And notice this is like Microsoft Word style tweaks that you can make to the aesthetics. I'm going to go ahead and increase the font size by clicking that a little bit here. I'll go ahead and let me click on the background, change the background to, let's say, other. Let's go ahead and choose, let's say, some crayon colors. We'll do lavender. And OK. So now proof that I'm actually making an iPhone app. So let me save it. Command R to recompile it. And with it, this nib file. As an aside, a nib file is just, all right, I didn't make the box big enough. A nib file is just an XML file. No, it's all right, dot, 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 dot. Next time we'll see what the rest of the sentence says. So what is a nib file? So if you open it with a text editor, the XIB file, it's just an XML file. It is not an XML file you should ever touch manually or edit because there's crazy constants in there and arbitrary values. It's just a way of representing this drag and drop GUI interface. And the idea is that it can just expedite creating an interface so that you don't have to do everything in code. Frankly, it's very tedious in code to have to say, I want this text area to be 17 pixels by 34 pixels and positioned up. It's just very tedious. You can do it. And sometimes it's better because it just gives you more control and you don't have to hide details with this drag and drop interface. But initially, this is a useful way to get started, certainly for the simplest of applications. So let's now close the demo application and go into the code and what was happening here. So the first file to talk about, and almost all of the templates have a file called this, appdelegate.h and .m. This is really the guy that's in charge of the program. When main is called, and it calls that UI application main function, that effectively hands control of the entire device off to this class, an object of this class that's created for you. So in the header file here, notice a couple of things. In app delegate, the guy in charge imports the UIKit header, so you can do stuff with GUIs. It imports, actually doesn't import, there's this keyword, class view controller. So this is just one, I think this is the last real new piece of syntax today. At class is kind of like a function prototype in that it's a hint to the compiler. This class exists. You might not have imported it yet. You'll eventually see it. But just so you don't freak out, here's the name of it, so I can mention it later as I do down here. All right, so next up is @interface app delegate. So UI responder is an Apple-made class whose purpose in life is to respond to things. And for now, let's oversimplify this by saying the app delegate, because it's in charge of the whole program, surely it's got to be able to respond to things like touches and presses and drags and swipes and the like. So app delegate descends from that class. And what does it mean in angled brackets here, UI application delegate? That means that app delegate does what? Uses that protocol, or more properly, implements that protocol, which means this class implements the methods that are declared in that protocol. This is similar in spirit to the copying protocol that we saw before. For now, I don't really know or care what it does, but just know that it's standardizing what an app delegate actually is. Now, we have two properties here. We haven't used the word strong before. We'll come back to that. It has to do with memory management. But for now, we'll almost always use the keyword strong instead of assign when it comes to pointers. So for now, that's a reasonable rule of thumb. But we'll tease that apart eventually. So here's this pointer. Apparently, out of the box, an application has a pointer to something called a UI window. What's that? It's just the rectangle of the screen. So that's good. Just intuitively, if this is the thing that's in charge of the application, he's got to have some way of communicating with the piece of glass, and so that you can actually draw things on the screen, listen to key presses and the like. So this pointer is that way of conversing back and forth with the physical device in code. The second thing here, view controller. Well, view controller is just a controller. So really, the app delegate is going to hand control off eventually to a proper controller that who wrote? us for the most part. So you'll sometimes add functionality to the app delegate, but generally your code will be in controller classes. And maybe not just one. Recall from CodeIgniter, you can have multiple controllers. So even though the app delegate is ultimately the thing in charge, he can hand control off to this view controller, this view controller, this view controller. And for now, you can think of a view controller as just a different screen of options. Each screen might need to scroll independently of others, so it's got to control the user's experience. So thankfully, we have a view controller file here, so there's already someone to whom we can further hand off control. End means we're at the end of this file. So now just remember that, again, an app delegate has a pointer to a UI window and to something called a view controller. So now let's look in the view controller.h class. Phew, doesn't do anything.